Could we have a roll call, please? I'm on.
Okay, Dr. Beebe?
Present.
Dr. Beebe is present. Ms. Bopey is not in attendance. Ms. Bradford?
Here.
Ms. Bradford is present. Mr. Garvey is not here yet. Mr. Gio?
Present.
Mr. Gio is present. Ms. Harris?
Here.
Ms. Harris is present. Ms. Hill?
Present.
Ms. Hill is present. Dr. Moranti will not be in attendance. Ms. Orange Hills is not here yet. Mr. Romer? Here. Mr. Romer is present. Ms. Smith?
Here.
Ms. Smith is present. And our student rep is not here yet either.
Thank
We have a
you.
quorum.
Thank you. Our first order of business will be a point of special interest. That's what it's called. Personal privilege, excuse me. And an interest, too. Ms. Harris.
Thank you very much. I would like at this time to recognize Ms. Lindsay Parker from North DeSoto Elementary in DeSoto Parish. Ms. Parker, would you please stand? Thank you. Ms. Parker has been awarded the prestigious Milken Educator Award, which is a national award and initiative of the Milken Family Foundation. The Milken Award honors top educators in the nation for excellence and dedication to the profession. You cannot apply or seek this award. They find you. And as a matter of fact, the recipients have no idea how they are even nominated or recognized. Ms. Parker was surprised in an assembly because they do not know about this award. And the award also comes with an unrestricted gift in the amount of $25,000. Yes, it's very nice. So Lindsay is a master teacher in the TAP program under the leadership of Superintendent Dr. Cade Brumley. Her innovative instructional and mentoring strategies helped North DeSoto raise the percentage of students scoring at the mastery and advanced levels from 20 to 40%, making North DeSoto a Louisiana top gain school with a growth of over 13%. So I was very proud to be able to attend Ms. Parker's surprise assembly, not only as a BESE member, but also as a past recipient of the Milken Award and a fellow Milken Award winner. So please join me in congratulating Lindsay Parker. This is an outstanding achievement, and can we take a picture? Okay.
On behalf of the board of BESE, I'd like to say congratulations as well. You bring us honor and you bring yourself honor. Thank you so much. Picture time. Thank you. Our first item.
Your consent agenda is ready for approval, adding items 4.1 and 4.2.
Do I have a motion to accept? We're pulling 4.1 for public comment. Do I have a motion to receive? Thank you. Do I have a second? Mr. Romer and Mr. Gia motioned and Mr. Romer second. For consent. Ms. Bofen? Melanie?
No.
No, we're not doing 4.1 yet. I was just bringing it up.
Oh, yeah.
So not to do
You can wait. I was given the card in error, so you can wait. Is it on the consent agenda?
No, it's not.
Okay. Any objection to the motion? Hearing none, the motion carries. Next item.
Your next item is on page 1, item 2.1, consideration of a plan regarding the Louisiana Competency-Based Education Program. A revised deck has been distributed. The department recommendation is to approve the state academic content standards review process and to review the update on the request for proposals draft summary.
Do I have a motion?
I move approve.
Do you have a second?
I know, I think we have some amendments coming, but
So,
Madam
Mr.
Chairman.
Ms. Smith.
Okay, thank you. At the appropriate time, I would like to just add this motion as in good faith. We're just starting a legislative session, and clearly there are going to be bills filed that will either make it through the process or not make it through the process. But with that understanding, I'd like to offer this just as maybe a little clarification or a little bit of direction. So I move to direct that any action taken by the board in regard to the Louisiana academic content standards must comply with the laws of this state. In the event that any law amended or enacted during the 2015 regular legislative session addresses Louisiana's academic content standards, the board shall take whatever actions as are necessary to ensure that such laws and board processes are aligned. So basically, we're just clarifying that whatever occurs during the legislative session, we realize that it may change some of what we're doing now, or it may not. But at any rate, when the legislative session ends, we will look at what has passed and then get that in line with what we would be directed to do by state law.
And I'll second it.
and I'll just amend my original motion to include that, if that's...
Thank you. That's what we needed to have
That's the easiest way
happen.
to
Okay. Yes, you may.
I just wanted to provide some context for those who may not have been in the discussion. I want to thank you, Ms. Smith, for that. That makes my job a lot easier because we're going to be talking with legislators about this issue. We're going to be talking with you about this issue. If we can just agree to abide by whatever change comes out of the legislature, then that makes this all a lot easier. So I thank you for that.
Mr. Reimer.
I want to add that I appreciate it. I know a lot of members have been working on this, and I appreciate that. And, you know, I know this really came out of what has been somewhat of a, I guess, contentious period of time. But also, I want to put it in context a little bit on how this process originally worked, which was the 7-year period of time that passed. That was appropriate in a day when textbooks, we were really driven by the textbook process. That's not as appropriate anymore. So this really solves two, in my opinion, at least a step towards solving two issues. One, which is addressing some of the concerns that are currently out there, make sure there's a process that does that, but also it establishes a process that doesn't wait every 7 years when we do have issues that we need to address. So, you know, I think almost every member has had some input in this that we're looking at today, and I certainly appreciate the effort that everyone's put forward. So, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Harris, did you have a comment?
I'll just wait till after the presentation.
Okay.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Dr. Beatty.
Good morning. We were issued a handout, and were there changes to what we received in the booklet? And I would like to have some clarification regarding the process. I understand at a previous meeting, the board approved a review process, and so, BESE approved a review, but yet we're determining a protocol, as I understand, a process.
I can walk through the process.
Please, because I would like to know the membership and who determines the committee composition.
That's
You know,
fine.
I know you have identified the representatives, but I would like to know, once we receive those nominations, what is the next step?
Got it. Well, why don't I just walk through the presentation? I'll do it quickly so I don't, Dr. Beebe, but I want to make sure your questions are answered. I want to be clear about one thing. First of all, BESE, again, subject to what Ms. Smith suggested around abiding by the legislature. So contingent on there being no changes in the law, BESE makes the determination as to who is on this body. So you will have a vote as to who is on this body. Why don't we walk through, Bridget, just quickly, and I'm going to review the history on this, and then I'll walk through the details. I want to thank, as Mr. Romer alluded to, all of the superintendents, the Superintendent's Advisory Council in particular. I want to thank the BESE members and others who have given us input on this, and the educators who have given us input on this. This is what we're striving for is a professional review process that is informed by the expert educators of our state and the parents of our state and the communities of our state, but is a professional process rather than otherwise. On the first slide, it says that BESE, as you alluded to, Dr. Beebe, directed the department to produce such a process. And so we're bringing you now the process as amended by Ms. Smith's motion and Mr. Romer's original motion. If you move to the next slide, what we've tried to do is to have a process that is, we can move ahead. What we've tried to do is to have a process that is consistent with the standards that are currently in use, but focuses on those standards to improve what exists today. And I think that part needs to be clear, that this committee must be empowered to change, adjust, augment, whatever is needed in order to ensure that we have the best Louisiana standards for Louisiana's children. And that is clear within the law. And within any documentation, that it is entirely within the latitude of this board to change whatever standard, adjust, resequence, reword, whatever we need to do what's right for Louisiana's kids. Fourth, that process is going to involve public input. Every meeting that I'm about to describe must be a public meeting so that there can be a public comment period taken, and so that if anyone's not represented on the committee, they can have their voice heard to the committee. So let's talk about the process specifically. This process envisions a standards committee that is in charge of the entirety of this process. They are going to bring to you recommendations to BESE, to this board. Now, they can do that, by the way, at any period of time, and I think it's important that you understand that under this proposal, they are empowered to do that at any moment in time. They don't have to wait for this process to be completed. If they see something that needs changing, they can come to you immediately and suggest that. However, there are 3 working committees: a K-2 subcommittee, an English language arts content committee, and a math content committee. That's really where the work is going to happen. So the standards committee is going to govern, but the work is going to happen at that lower level. At least half of the standards committee will be current Louisiana district and school-based educators. That is the governing committee. And that's where we started with that basic premise, but then built out a committee through many conversations. And Dr. Beebe, this gets to your first question, that has the following structure. And so if you look on the slide that says standards committee at the top, you'll see that it has a nominating body and that it has a set of qualifications. So first we said, okay, whom do you want represented on this professional group? You want members of the content committees. In other words, you need a connection between the content committees and the standards committee. Those are going to be educators. You need content experts, maybe representative of higher education, who are academics themselves, as I know a couple of you are. You need representatives from the higher education system. You also need parents. You need principals, superintendents, school board members, charter school representative, and business and industry. So you want every edge of the spectrum represented. And then the question is, well, who nominates those individuals? And I will get Dr. Beebe to the nominating process at the end of how that process will work. But we selected, in consultation with these groups, essentially the bodies that will do this nominating. I want to highlight that I'll address the issue of special education when we get to the content committees. So you'll take the category of participant, then a nomination. BESE will review the nominations, and then we have to establish, and I'll talk about this later, geographic, racial, and gender diversity. And I do think it's important that we acknowledge that that the department has to work in bringing a recommendation to you that is reflective of those criteria. Okay, now, there are going to be 3 content subcommittees. 75% of these groups at a minimum will be current district and school-based educators. This is really the people who are using the standards on a day-to-day basis today. And so you will see then a similar chart, and I won't go through all of them, but where you'll see that school systems are going to nominate kindergarten, first grade, and second grade educators. School districts will nominate content experts. University deans and the Early Childhood Association will nominate an early content experts, and school systems will nominate special education experts. Now, as I said before, some of these individuals will also be represented on the standards committee. So you have at the content level a mix of teachers, district personnel, and other content experts from higher education and otherwise. You'll notice that there are requirements, such as at least one has to have a background in childhood psychology. As I said before, there will be at least one special education expert on each of these groups. So we're trying to cover all appropriate angles when it comes to the technical work of analyzing the standards. I won't go through it in detail, but if you look at the English Language Arts Committee, obviously it wouldn't be the Early Childhood Association, it would be the Louisiana Reading Association that would do the nominating. And the same would be true in mathematics, where rather than the Reading Association, you'd have the Council of the Teachers of Mathematics. Okay, now I'm going to close by talking about the nominating process, and then I'll talk briefly about how the review process that we envision looks like. In the nominating, every district in the state will be able to nominate 6 school-based educators, 2 district content staff members, and 1 special education expert. They may nominate those across the committees that we're talking about. Each of the organizations that I mentioned, whether it's the Parent-Teacher Association, the Urban League, the Association of Teachers of Mathematics, the Superintendent Association, they will be able to nominate 4 candidates. All we ask for is they meet the criteria described and that they be able to make the time commitments needed, and I'll talk about those in a second. Ultimately, the department will choose a group that meets not only the parameters of each committee and each role, but also, as I said, that reflects the geographic, racial, ethnic, and gender diversity of our state. So that, for example, we wouldn't want one region of the state to be wholly overrepresented versus another. 96 total committee members will be chosen between the 4 committees, and they will be brought to you. To Dr. Beebe, to your point, and I'm sure that people's minds are going in this direction, how you vote on those members is entirely at the discretion of the board. We are not bringing a recommendation. That's a board process question that I think should be addressed when we get to that point. We envision that you will be able to take this vote at the next BESE meeting, however. And that all committee members would be informed of their role by June 22nd of this calendar year.
Superintendent,
Yes, ma'am.
point of clarification.
Yes.
all nominees will be aware of their nomination and have agreed to it prior to reaching BESE.
Correct. And actually, we've been in discussions with a couple of you who I think have some thoughts on that issue, which I believe may be addressed in the discussion. Yeah. Yes. Here's, after working this through the Superintendent's Advisory Council, after talking with educators and other focus groups, here is the process that we envision. One is a public comment process where the standards themselves are posted online so that the public can start by reviewing the standards and submitting comment. We think this will prove useful because then that gives the committee something to essentially start with to see where there are suggestions in great numbers. The Standards Committee will then meet after that 2-month online process in October for an initial review and to lay out the work. The content committees will also meet, and the content committees will meet again in January and meet again in April. Now, they may well meet, I'm sure, I know they will, to do work themselves as individuals, but in terms of a public meeting, the public meetings will be these dates, October, January, and April. And really, those content committees are ultimately, by April, charged with voting on a proposed update. In other words, a majority vote will determine what to come back to the Standards Committee with. The Standards Committee is then charged, as you see under Phase 2, with putting that up for public comment and with essentially conducting a final review. That final review is in September of next year. Now, they may say to a subcommittee, look, you need to go back and work on this more because we're hearing, this is not working well. On the other hand, they may just go ahead and vote on it and move it right back to BESE. And as I said, at any point in this process, the Standards Committee can come to you and can say, look, this is obvious. We need to change this. Let's just change it.
Yeah. If I may, I want to make sure I understand that. If there's a standard that we know now is, for whatever reason, needs to be modified or improved, we don't have to wait to work through this timeline in order for that to be brought back.
Absolutely not.
If there's something that's obvious, that's completely obvious, we can take care of that.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. And the Standards Committee needs to be explicitly empowered to do that.
Okay.
Thus, at the latest, BESE would vote on this, there would be a final vote of the Standards Committee in November of next year, and BESE would vote on it in December of next year at the latest. But as Mr. Romer notes, at any point in between, they could move whatever they want to move back to this body.
Mr. Superintendent?
Yes.
So, in my understanding, the 96 members are going to be made up. That's the Standards Committee as well as all of the subcommittees.
Yes, and there's some overlap.
And there's some overlap. So if there's 26 on the Standards Committee, then some of that 26 will make up part of the other committees.
Yes.
So it may actually be, there's going to be 96, but it could be, as you said, some overlapping. So the process, will we have all of the nominations at one time? That's a little bit confusing to me. Are we going to look at 96 members that are going to be recommended at one time?
We are, although I'm happy to conduct the vote however you think best. In other words, however, President Romer, you, or Chairman Bradford, however you would like to take that process, I'm happy to. I also think that, and I believe, Ms. Harris, we've been discussing this, that it might be helpful to accelerate the timeline in terms of the identification of nominees so that you have more time for review and so that your constituents and the public have more time for review, which I think is totally fine.
And that was pretty much what I was thinking about. So if we get the proposed BESE, the recommendation, let's say it goes online May 25th, and we're going to vote in June, will that online recommendations, all of those names will be available, say at a certain time for a review by the general public and BESE members as well, so that there could be input if there was, to just assure transparency on that issue.
Absolutely, and if it's helpful to add that to the motion, we could certainly do that.
I think that would help.
As a separate motion, I
yeah,
suppose.
I think that would help.
Yeah,
On
absolutely.
transparency.
Dr. Beebe?
Okay. So Superintendent White, if I understand, we will have a massive list, because if every district, every school district nominates 6, and that's what you're saying, 6, and then I think there are other positions. So we would have a list, an extensive list with credentials identified, and of course they would have to meet the credentials, so
Yeah.
that would be understood. But you know, I think it would be somewhat challenging for us to know if we don't know these individuals, and then we may all have differing opinions. So how are we going to narrow down to those 96 individuals? Or do we continue to vote? Have you established a process?
I'm sorry, I should have said this more clearly. We plan on bringing a recommendation, and here's why I think it's important that there be one recommended list. The minute we get into, and I'm not suggesting we shouldn't debate, you can take the vote however you want to take it. But the minute that we go toward picking off individuals, that individual will represent not just that they can do the job, but they'll represent their parish, they'll represent their region, they'll represent their grade level, and candidly, their demographic background as well. So I want to make sure that all of those things are in balance, which is why we think it's important that we bring you one list of recommendations, and then where you see problems with it, you can instruct us to make changes. I certainly understand that. But I want to make sure that we start with one list, we bring you one list, so that all of those factors, diversity-wise, the skills-wise, district-wise, region-wise, are represented on that list.
And if I may, I wrote down some thoughts. Because certainly as an educator, I've been most vocal about the standards, some not being age and developmentally appropriate. So I think based on past action that we have approved the review of standards, that the review is certainly transparent. I welcome the fact that it's open and that we will afford the feedback and discussion from our stakeholders. But I will also add that I have communicated with many who have expressed concerns about the timings of this standards review, and we know, Superintendent White, you articulated in the past that this is common practice. It's done every 7 years, and of course this is being done, this process has been approved amid controversy over the Common Core standards and during an election year where the final outcome of the Common Core debate will likely be decided at the ballot box by the people. And again, we can't negate that there is a concern that this process may be used to whitewash the adoption of Common Core standards. And we have the study from, the survey rather, from LSU that said over 60% of the public, or those responding, oppose any standards, although they support rigorous standards. They don't want any association with Common Core. And so then we're suggesting that we get new standards that are unconnected to Common Core when these standards are merely Common Core by another name. And certainly we want to avoid that concern, because many people out there have a concern. Although a standards review is welcome, we must consider the practical impact of any effort to retain Common Core standards. Regardless of how you may personally feel about Common Core standards, it is indisputable that Common Core is a divisive issue and that a significant number of parents, teachers, and civic leaders have no faith in the Common Core standards. Going forward, it is impossible to build a consensus in our state around standards that include Common Core. It is impossible. We need to develop rigorous state standards that are inclusive and respectful of the viewpoints of all stakeholders. And I understand with the process you're suggesting that we are including all stakeholders, but there will still be those, myself included, because of the lack of transparency by your by you and the department. And I have to say it. There's been understandable anger and confusion over the Common Core standards, and I tell people often we are having great debates about the standards when in reality it's much greater than the standards. We're going to continue, I see that moving forward, we will continue to have the divisiveness and the confusion. Our teachers and students do not need this distraction. We can do better than Common Core. And I certainly oppose any effort to use this review process to rebrand Common Core standards as something else in order to mislead the public. And I will dismiss the findings of any review process that is not completely transparent or does not allow adequate feedback and input from the public. The outcry over Common Core should remind the politicians that the people of Louisiana will not be deceived by trickery. And I hope that this review process will be done honestly and open, and will take notice of the legitimate concerns that people throughout Louisiana have about Common Core. Again, Ms. Bradford,
I'm sorry.
I want to make one additional point. There is, and I've said it, but I will reiterate it, there is a lack of trust among BESE and State Superintendent White, and I don't see how a review is going to yield any different outcome than we are presently experiencing. You know, the fact is, Superintendent White, you just indicated that we're going to have a committee put forth. Well, there may be those that are very much pro Common Core standards. So then how are we going to convince those who have the concerns that, again, it's not a rubber stamp committee that's going to produce the results that you're seeking?
Here's what I would suggest. I recognize that we have not all shared opinions. I don't think it's black and white, anti-pro. I think we all have a wide diversity of opinions on this. We want this body to be representative of a wide diversity of opinions. So whatever, but we got to get there. We got to get to a vote. You know, you all need to vote on something someday. So I will ask Ms. Harris maybe, because I think you shared some thoughts with us earlier about this. Maybe it's helpful to get to that process.
Yes.
Ms. Harris.
Thank you very much. I just think in the spirit of even greater transparency, there have been a lot of concerns about transparency, that maybe I would like to make a motion that I move to direct the LDE to post on the website.
You can't make that motion
Okay.
at this time, but
What
I
is it?
appreciate it that you can tell you that that motion is coming
Okay, and it's coming to make you to,
after this vote.
She could make a substitute motion, I think, or amend.
Not
no,
well,
I'll just do it when it's appropriate. But there have been a lot of concerns about transparency, so we have, worked on some, the nomination part to maybe make this motion in a little while when it's appropriate about the nominating process and putting some of the nominations on the website forms for people to review.
it just has to be done separate because this motion contains more than that.
But essentially, I mean, and tell me if I'm getting this wrong, and I understand it as it's described here, it doesn't necessitate that there be a long period of time for either board members or the public to understand who the department has brought forth. And you're suggesting, I believe, that we would want that to be out there so that people could have this debate that Dr. Beebe is alluding to in a fair and transparent way.
Right, to see who's going to, who's been nominated and their experience and how they've been nominated, and for people to have time to review those people.
Any other comments, questions?
Well,
Here.
I would only, if I may, I
Mr.
would
Romer.
only add, I think Ms. Harris has a good idea. We obviously need to let the nominating bodies know that their nominees are agreeing to also, I assume,
Put their
want them
resume
to be, publicly identified, which.
Exactly.
So if somebody doesn't want to be publicly identified, they need to remove themselves
Withdraw.
from being considered. I think that's would be, I just want to make sure, we need to make sure our nominating bodies know this is a part of the process. And so nominees are going to have to be willing to go through that process, which is fine, and I think it's a good step. But we
Thank
need
you,
to make
Mr.
sure that's
Romer.
clear.
Any other questions or comments? Hearing none. Any opposition to the motion? Motion carries. Ms. Harris?
I move to direct the LDE to post...
Excuse me. We had public comments that I just rolled right over. I apologize. We are going to go to the public comments, and we will reconsider. Debbie Moe.
Debbie Moe, representing Louisiana Association of Educators, and thank you for allowing me to have my comments. The first thing that I do want to say kind of reiterates a little bit of what Board Member Lottie Beebe brought to your attention. I just recently had my annual meeting this past weekend, and I heard a lot about Common Core, and we did adopt a resolution that will be sent to all the members of the BESE board, the governor, Superintendent White, and the legislators. To say that all of my members are against Common Core, I can't say that they're all against it, but I do know that our elementary teachers are having great difficulties with it. In the statements, or in the PowerPoint, it stated that this is a review process that is going to take a look at the current standards and do some adjustments. I think that most of us feel as though that the results are predetermined with that language. And for our K through 3, maybe even through the 5th grade, many of our teachers believe that there need to be huge overhauls of the Common Core standards. As we get into the junior high, upper junior high, and the high school level, there are some concerns, but they believe that the Common Core standards are doable. And in those areas, most of the problems seem to be with curriculum rather than with the standards themselves. And even in elementary, there's huge concern over curriculum. I believe it's important that we make sure that the committee is empowered to do what needs to be done, and not just do a little tweak here or a little tweak there and then rebrand them as Louisiana standards. So in that vein, I am very much in favor of what Ms. Lottie Beebe has expressed to you, and our members echo that. The second thing that I wanted clarification on, I do know that in the standards nominating, each of the associations, LAE, AFT, which would be LFT in our state, and APEL, are allowed to have one person on the standards committee, and we're allowed to nominate 4 people, if I'm correct, for that one position. However, I don't see any presence on the other bodies. Not that that precludes that any of the people on the standards committee would be our members. But I was just hoping for clarification on that so that I know how many people I need to nominate.
Thank you, Ms. Knight. Next, Thomas Groves, excuse me.
Good morning. My name is Thomas Groves. I'm with the Assistant Commissioner with the Division of Administration, and I have Paul Holmes with me, who is with the Office of State Procurement. In light of timelines and process, we thought we would make you aware of a few things, just so you know where we stood with the RFP process for the testing. We received on April 7th a...
May I just ask for clarification? I'd hate to be out of order, but this item does not concern testing in any way, nor does it concern procurement or contracts in any way. Is there something that the board needs to be advised of?
Is this process for after the procurement for the testing is done? Is that when this starts?
This process starts as soon as this meeting is over.
Okay, so is the RFP process going to come up?
No, and it hasn't come up in this discussion, and the RFP has nothing to do with this. I mean, they're connected insofar as the law requires a standards-based assessment, but this is about academic standards review. This is not about the RFP process.
I think
I think it's item 2 of
yeah.
this. Item 2.
It says, receive the update on the request for proposal RFP.
I see. So you're referring to the fact that we're supposed to provide an update, and you're here to provide an update?
Correct. We're here to provide an update on where you are with the RFP process, make sure everybody understands that.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yeah, you're correct.
Okay.
Continue.
And again, this is informational purposes only. So, we received the RFP for, we have 3 in-house. We were about to get we got a 4th for evaluation. LEAP 2025 Math and English Language Arts Assessment Development RFP, LEAP 2025 Science Content RFP, LEAP 2025 Social Studies Content RFP, and currently in the Office of Service Technologies for review is the LEAP 2025 Assessment Administration RFP. I just want to make you aware of how this process works. This did come up last time. We addressed it at a high level, and I will keep it at high level today. The process is to promote competition in order to obtain the best outcome for the state. And therefore, the RFP has to be drafted to encourage sufficient number of proposers. So with regard to these RFPs, we would think that you'd ask these questions in the process, and these will come up at some point during the process as we work with y'all on it. Have we thoroughly assessed the marketplace to determine how many companies offer this type of service as we seek? How many companies will be contacted directly about the issuance of the RFP? How many proposers who actually meet the experience requirements do we hope to get a reply? How many do we know of, any potential proposers to meet the experience requirements contained in the RFP, and those that do not? And this is to make sure that we're asking and requiring the appropriate experience levels in the RFP. Secondly, we need to ask the questions: who drafted the specifics and the criteria for the RFP? Were there any specifics or specifications, criteria, either supplied or incorporated from materials developed by a potential proposer? And if so, they need to be identified. And the RFP is set forth extensive requirements for proposers. Especially, we want to ask how will we evaluate and be able to distinguish among proposers for the stated criteria other than price? And I say evaluate, and I also encourage for a RFP this size, we're going to encourage a PST team and an evaluation team that is comprised of impartial and fair members so that there is a fair evaluation. The biggest concern I have, and I mentioned as a concern, is the time frame that has been laid out so far or has been proposed. Again, for the administration contract, we have our Office of Technology Services assisting with that. And in order to meet the date requirements and have the final contract approval for October 1st, we've had to squeeze a number of these approval processes. Normally some things that take 3 weeks, we're squeezing to 2, and I can't promise you if a toe is stubbed or one thing is missing that we're not going to miss this date. I'll let Paul talk to you about some of the details behind that, but we're committed to working with you to make sure all these happen. But I do want to make sure everybody understands that the time frames to get this complete by October might not be doable based on how late we receive this and everything that it has to go through. And I'll be happy to answer any questions about that.
Mr. Holmes?
Let me just start off by saying the Office of State Procurement hasn't received this OTS initiated contract or RFP
Pull it a little
yet.
closer to you if you don't
Can you
mind.
hear me?
Thank you. That's better.
Right. So I haven't seen that, but my office has received 3 separate RFPs last week on April the 7th. That's the Math and English Language Arts, kindergarten through high school, science grades 3 through 8, and social studies grades 3 through 8. And the information I have is that these are LEAP 25 assessment content development contracts. The cover letter from Mr. John White stated that we are looking at a July 2nd date to commence a contract under these 3 RFPs. That's our understanding. We have a bit of concern about that, July 2nd.
Where was that
commencement.
stated, sir?
Pardon me?
Where was that stated?
From what I understand, that was implied or stated in a cover letter that you provided?
I've never stated that. I stated that the contract that ends on June 30. The current contracts that end June 30. I've not listed a date for any future contract. Obviously, that's subject to your office and the Office of Contractual Review.
Okay. Regardless, that does raise concerns. We have contracts that expire June 30th. We're starting a process that appears, in all likelihood will go beyond that particular date. And we need to put you on notice of that.
We've received your timeline.
Okay. And we're putting it on fast track. We've assigned personnel. We have an assistant director who's looking at it directly. She's looking to set a meeting with DOE this week so that we can figure out timelines and see what can possibly be done and find out when these contracts absolutely have to take effect.
We look forward to it.
But again, just from our experience, the size of the contracts, the fact that at least one of them is possibly a 12-year contract. We're talking multi-million dollars per year on a yearly basis. And the timeline we're getting, at least the wishes from the DOE, it looks like we're trying to basically squeeze 3 RFP evaluations, including getting the results and then entering into contracts in a 3-week period. And from my experience, that would be almost impossible if that is the case. Best case scenario, we're looking at perhaps August, more likely September, October, maybe even beyond when we're talking about contracts of this particular size.
And with that in mind, I just ask that we be careful because there could be risk associated if there are any services performed prior to the contract being executed. You could put the state at risk, and we can't guarantee that there'll be payments of any services before the contract being done.
Thank you, Mr. Groves. We appreciate you being here today. Lee Barrios.
I'd like to say something.
I have a question.
I just can't help myself.
Try.
I appreciate what your experience tells you. Let me tell you what my experience tells me. I question the sincerity of your testimony, and I apologize for that.
Is that a
And
question?
I wonder, you said you want the best outcome for our state. I wish you would describe what that means.
I'm sorry, can you restate your question, please?
You said you want the best outcome for our state. I would like you to describe what you think that is.
That needs to be defined in the RFP and needs to be defined by you and the committee. I'm not here to testify to.
I want to make sure. So that's to be defined by us, correct?
If that's how you define it, you need to define that in the RFP. What is it you're looking for? The best price, best service? Are you looking for innovative
The best product
services?
for the kids of our state.
You need to
How's
define
that sound for? How's that sound for an idea?
It's completely up to you.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Lee
I
Barrios.
have a question.
Ms. Hill.
And this is for the gentleman. I know one of the concerns was a 12-year contract that I guess LDOE is trying to enter in, which would cost the state millions of dollars. Could you elaborate on that? I mean, because when you look at the RFP, I mean, I don't know. I know we as a board have to come up with the review process in regards to before the RFP goes to the procurement office. I haven't seen it as of yet as a board member, so maybe this something is in the works. I don't know. But I guess my concern would be in regards to the contracts, you're not advising us to go into 12-year contracts or beyond based on the cost.
Can I just say something just quickly?
I'm just trying to get
I'm
some
not an attorney.
Superintendent.
But I would strongly advise that we not have discussions in this venue about the specifics of contracts in advance of the board considering a proposed contract for their approval subsequent to your procurement process. If you disagree with that, but I do believe that, frankly, public officials engaging in a public discourse about an RFP that has already been sent and is now in the review process is probably not advisable on either side of the equation. I'm not an attorney, so I'm perfectly open to being wrong, but I would ask you to consider that before answering.
Right. We are here on a high level to discuss timelines
Generalities.
primarily. In regard to these particular RFPs, we're not here today to get into any specifics and any details that are actually contained in the specific RFPs. I don't know if your question is geared
Okay,
to
well, I
that or
guess my
not.
question would be, what is the process, Superintendent White? Because I think for me as a board member, I can't speak for everyone else, but I don't know. I
Okay,
mean,
so let me-
what is the-
Superintendent?
So I'm going to speak at a high level myself. I somewhat regret this discussion with respect to my colleagues in the division because we're focused on a standards review process here. The item also happens to mention that I am available to provide an update on a procurement process, but it is really the matter for your consideration is the standards review process, and I think we were making great progress on that prior to this intervention. Nevertheless, there is an administrative process of which you, as an official, are part of at the conclusion. But there is an intentional reason why boards like this one are not a party to the process at the outset. And that is that this process is designed to ensure objectivity and, as was said, competition and fairness in the process. The department is charged under the law with submitting to the Division of Administration a set of specifications. It's the job of the Division of Administration to do two things: to review to make sure those specifications meet with the terms of the law, and two, to then conduct a process whereby anyone who responds to that request for proposal is given a fair process. And as was said, the state uses cost and other factors to determine, a committee does, to determine what the appropriate bid is. That bid is then transformed into a contract if it's ultimately approved, and that contract is brought here for your approval. Your role is to approve something after this entire process, and candidly, that is done so as to ensure that there is no outside influence brought to bear on processes such as this, which is why I'm suggesting that we delineate the process of your approving a contract from the procurement process, which is supposed to be insulated from public discussions and political environments, perhaps including this one.
We're just making sure you understand the
We
process.
understand. Thank you very much.
Ms. Barrios.
Thank you very much.
Lee Barrios, retired teacher from St. Tammany and now candidate for BESE District 1. I'm representing today several teachers from St. Tammany, so I've asked for 5 minutes. Please bear with me, especially since this is a process that was done behind closed doors.
Would you try to make it as fast as you can, please?
Yes, well, 5 minutes, absolutely.
Or less.
Has been presented to you today. The public, no way in 2 or 3 minutes can the public have sufficient time, if they could be here, to really go through this before you take a vote on it. So what I'm going to do, because I cannot address everything about this process, is to try to clarify on behalf of all the hard work and expertise that teachers in the past have put into our previous standards, to clarify the accuracy. You stated, Mr. White, in your slide presentation on the first slide, the process will continue on a path begun more than 4 years ago to raise student expectations and outcomes. You also said in your second slide that state law, RS 17, requires BESE to approve, quote, nationally recognized content standards that present knowledge and skills needed for students to successfully transition to post-secondary ed and the workplace. I wanted to read to you a cover letter with our 2004 and 5 revised standards and GLEs written by Cecil Picard. And it says, rapid changes are occurring in our world and economy. The increasing complexity of work that spans the entire workforce of today's society demands that education for all students be made more relevant and useful to future careers. In response to these demands, Louisiana educators and citizens collaborated to develop an action plan to establish content standards that would raise the academic expectations of students. Our mission was to develop rigorous and challenging standards that will enable all Louisiana students, et cetera, to be able to move into real life and work situations. It also says, to prepare Louisiana students to meet the demands of society in the 21st century, these higher standards were designed to address, et cetera, et cetera. So the idea that we were not moving toward higher standards far before 4 years ago is a misnomer. These standards were nationally recognized also. For example, one example, Ed Week's Quality Counts. Every year since at least 2003, that's as far back as I went, we received an A rating for our standards, our assessments, and accountability. In another slide, you stated, quote, Elementary and Secondary Education Act, that's federal government, federal law, requires that states set forth challenging expectations and contain coherent and rigorous content, and that they encourage the teaching of advanced skills. Mr. Picard says, again in his letter in the 4th paragraph, Louisiana has made significant strides toward improving the education of our children by developing rigorous standards and challenging assessments that align with the standards, and by holding schools accountable for results. Slide 7, you said Louisiana academic standards should be a living set of nationally comparable expectations. The attachment to our standards in 2004 lists numerous pages of references to standards comparability in other states that were part of the process, in addition to the National Council of Teachers of Math, the National Council of Teachers of English, the National Science Commission, and NAEP, which we used recommendations by the Department of Ed based on their research. What our standards did do that Common Core does not do, and I hope are addressed if this review goes forward, which I'm sure it will. In Mr. Picard's letter, he says these content standards have been developed for all Louisiana students, including students with disabilities, gifted and talented students, as well as linguistically and culturally diverse students. Modifications for addressing their specific needs will be addressed. That is not done with the Common Core standards. I don't like this quick process. It was done behind closed doors. I don't think it can be accomplished today in one vote, and I can assure you that the parents and educators in this state will not allow a quick review process that is bogus to rebrand our Common Core standards. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Barrios. Ashley Hare.
My name's Ashley Hire. I'm actually a current AP US History teacher at Woodlawn High School here in Baton Rouge, and I've had a great deal of experience this year, actually probably being the only person in this room that's taught a curriculum directly transition to Common Core, and a test that's dramatically changed from the pre-Common Core style the pre-Common Core test last year. It has been a challenge, but it has been a rewarding one, and I've seen dramatic changes in my students' ability to think. This morning I just came from them analyzing the elements of Russian identity watching a sitcom. I could never have imagined that before, because they just didn't understand how to put the pieces together the way that we taught under the old standards. So I'm in support of this because we've worked very hard as professional educators to transition to a new way of addressing our students' needs from the 2004 standards. These are standards that prepare us for the 21st century, standards established by governors, not the federal government, by businesses, not the federal government, and testing processes have been determined by private organizations, not the federal government. It has been hard work to do this, and I understand that there are some standards that could certainly be clarified or modified based on our experience, but we simply can't revert to the Blanco standards of 2004. They're out of line with the national expectations for critical thinking and analysis. That's not to say that they weren't good 11 years ago, but today they're not in line with the expectations of our students. Rolling back the clock will be detrimental to our students because of all of the tests that they have to take to determine their future career and secondary education options. As of right now, the ACT, Advanced Placement Exams, new SAT, IB exams that our governor's children will take, by the way, ASVAB, all expect that students have the skills in the national standards. They actually learn the MCAT is even switching to this, and probably the GRE. Our students have to be able to know the skills required in the current national standards in order to be able to pass any of the tests that they need to go to college. If we roll back and use the old standards from 2004 as the basis for this, we will do our students a tremendous disservice. And I have to say, last week I went on a college tour with my daughter, and every single school I went to stressed these tests and the outcome of these tests and the critical thinking that our students are gaining nationwide from these standards. I'm also a graduate student at LSU, and I've started to hear from my professors excitement over the possibilities in their classrooms, over the fact that students have been taught at an early age, vertically teamed throughout their elementary and secondary experience to analyze things properly. So I hope that as you go forward, you will not put our students at a competitive disadvantage by giving them a curriculum that doesn't align to these tests. It is not a slow process because the testing companies have already begun this. The new SAT comes next year, and as a parent of a student taking that, yes, I'm scared to death of what my daughter's going to see. I know it's expected, but it's all brand new, and we can't go back in time when the world is pushing forward. So I used to work in politics, and I know that to win an election, you have to play on the fears. Hopes and dreams don't matter. You make people vote for you because of your fears. As a professional educator, I know one thing, that we work for the hopes and dreams of our students. When I go back to school for senior signing day and hear students say their scholarships, when they come to me excited that they've made the ACT score to get in the honors college, they've made the ACT score to make tops their first try as a junior, I see their hopes, I see their dreams, and I see that they have no fear. I hope that along with my students, the state of Louisiana will have no fear in pushing forward with the current standards.
Thank you, Ms. Hyde. Mr. Richard, I'm going to allow you to speak, but I want to remind everybody, if you want to speak on an item in my committee, then I expect for you to put in a card following our procedure now at the end of this meeting so that we will indeed be able to have opportunity for everyone to speak. Mr. Richard.
Thank you, Ms. Bradford, for that opportunity, and good morning to you as chairperson and the members of the committee. Again, graciously appreciate the opportunity to have public comment on such a controversial issue today. My question is about logistics and the mechanics of the actual process in regards to the PowerPoint slides that have been presented today and have been on the BESE agenda. And just a point of clarification, you have several associations listed on the standards committee, and you have some delineations that are specific in regards to a current sitting person or a current practicing person from those respective committees. But yet the associations, various associations that are represented, would nominate a person. By nature of an association, the associations hire people that can participate in these processes and can report out to the membership. And my question is this: if the Superintendent's Association nominated their executive director to participate in this process, if the Teachers Associations nominated their leaders of their associations, if the Principals Association nominated its executive director to participate in this process, based on the requirements that are laid out in this presentation, would that preclude those folks from serving on this endeavor?
Thank you, Mr. Richard.
Scott, I mean, I think it depends how that group operates. I mean, in your case, I believe you are not, I don't know this, but I don't believe you are a current sitting school board member, just as I believe Mr. Monahan is not a current classroom educator. Candidly, I don't know exactly what the nomenclature is. Rogers Pope, I believe, is the executive director of the school board, or the Superintendent Association, but I could be wrong about that. Maybe it's Ms. Voce. I don't really know. So I think that in each of these cases, it depends on the group. But it does say a current Louisiana superintendent. Now, Ms. Voce is a current superintendent. It does say a current school board member. I don't believe you are a current school board member. So if you're requesting a change of that, I believe we could certainly consider it. But I think that is, that's been done intentionally under the idea that the person doing the review should be actively doing the work in the education system.
I understand. And yes, it would be a request for consideration, simply due to the fact that by the nature of an association, folks are able to report out to their membership, whereas an individual that's practicing would have to be pulled out of their current setting leave work and participate in this very lengthy process. So we'd appreciate your consideration on that.
Thank you, Mr. Richard. Dr. Beebe.
And I would like to add to Mr. Richard's concerns. While there are representatives of these associations, oftentimes they do come with education experience. Speaking to Mr. Richard's experience, he certainly has a wealth of knowledge and expertise in curriculum and would be extremely suitable for the purpose of reviewing standards. My concern is, why would you want to have representation on a committee and have individuals who are very limited in the scope of standards knowledge? And so I think we need to be very careful that the membership of this committee would have curriculum knowledge.
Well, I think that's actually the intent of doing what we're doing here, which is that, you know, and I'm not speaking about Mr. Richard at all when I say this, nor Mr. Monahan or anyone else, but oftentimes, and I work in, you know, public policy, the people who are hired to be the executive directors of associations are good at the intergovernmental aspect, but their expertise is not necessarily in the day-to-day work of being an X or, you know, Y or whatever it is. And so I think what we're trying to avoid here, as much respect as I have for the two people I've been talking about, and this does not have any reference to them, but is a body of people who are more skilled in the policy arena than they are in the actual curriculum and standards issue. Because I do have a concern that, and it's a trade-off, because I think what Scott is saying is right. You know, there are people who are, their full-time job is to be at meetings, and he's right. You know, we're pulling people out. I think the appropriate balance, and maybe this gives members some comfort, is to know that every one of these meetings will be a public meeting. Just like when you come to the Superintendent's Advisory Council, or when Mr. Monahan or Mr. Richard or Ms. Moe come to that council, they very often provide testimony in a pretty intimate setting that's, you know, make sure their voice is heard, while at the same time, I think, giving this board comfort that your slate is not going to end up being anyone whose expertise is in anything other than the day-to-day work of schooling. And that's how we're trying to strike the balance.
Mr. Garvey?
Yeah, I would add to what the superintendent just said, and that the complaints that I've been hearing is that, whether the complaints are right or wrong, was that in the original process of adopting our current standards, we didn't have enough classroom teachers on the adoption committee or involved in the process. I have not been hearing complaints about not having enough executive directors involved in the process. So I would encourage us to maybe not have exclusively classroom teachers, but have a high percentage of classroom teachers, which I think the current plan calls for.
Thank you, Mr. Garvey. We have voted on this, and unless someone makes a motion to rescind that vote and go back, we will move forward. And Ms. Harris, I think I'm going to call on you.
Okay. Yes, thank you. I would like to make a motion. And I just hope this will go a long way in easing some concerns about who's being nominated. So in the spirit of even, you know, more transparency, I move to direct the LDE to post on its website the nomination forms of the committee members included in the committee makeup proposal submitted to BESE by no later than May 25th, 2015.
Do I have a second? Ms. Hill seconds. Any comments or concerns?
I just have a question. Does that fit in? Does that timetable fit into what's proposed?
It does. Okay. Yes.
Another
it would basically give, let me just play this out, I believe, Ms. Harris, 3 weeks of viewing of public before it gets posted on the BESE agenda.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mr. Garvey?
Yes, the date that Ms. Harris mentioned, is it possible, conceivable, that the department could do it faster than what's being called for?
Then May 25th?
Yes.
We could. I think the risk is that to districts, as they formulate their list and as we go back and forth with them, if you want, what is today, April 14th, if you wanted us to bump it up by a matter of days, we could. Mr. Garvey, I do worry if we bump it up too far that we're going to be a little jammed on our end.
Okay.
Perhaps we just leave it at this date, and if you can get it on earlier, you will.
And a question for the superintendent.
Do that. Yeah. Yes,
in
sir.
approving the process and the list of nominations that you have here today, if in going through this process we find that there's a problem, do you envision us not being able to adjust this going forward?
No, I think at any moment you have the authority to adjust it.
Okay, thank you. And that's to follow up on what the last speaker was asking about. If we need to adjust it, we can adjust it going forward. Thank you.
Dr. Beebe.
And Superintendent White, I have to go back to your response to me.
Sure.
Regarding a current Louisiana school board member. Well, a current school board member will likely not have the curriculum expertise. Now, it is conceivable that they are a retired educator, but I think in a situation like this, when there are associations, that the association determines that representative.
I'll tell you, I mean, you would know better than anyone on this panel, but it's been my impression from sitting in on dozens of school board meetings that there are many retired educators, for example, who sit today on school boards, hundreds of them, who would be experts in both this issue and would qualify as sitting school board members and would bring both perspectives. I actually don't see a group on here that in my view at least, Dr. Beebe, doesn't have expert curriculum and standards representation fully possible.
Any other questions or comments?
I think win this argument, so. And that's why, that's the sentiment, Mr. White, is that.
Dr. Beebe.
Yeah, the sentiment is, we are putting forth a committee that we trust and believe in, that there's transparency, but the door is already shut. And it's obvious that you're saying to Mr. Richard, although you would qualify, you are a retired educator with extreme knowledge and expertise, but we're not allowing you to be considered to be a part of the committee. So, again, I don't think we're helping our cause by shutting the door.
Thank you, Dr. Beebe.
Madam Chairman,
Ms. Smith.
is it possible that we could just change the wording to say a representative of the LSBA, and that way the executive board or whomever could determine in the spirit of...
So, Mr. Guillot, I'd like to speak, so if you'll be the chair for a minute. I think the purpose of this is to have a sitting school board member who brings the perspective of an elected official at the local level. And I do think that that is the appropriate thing that we should be asking for, not, excuse me, Mr. Richard, a paid employee. Any other questions or comments?
Let me just provide final clarity on this. I believe that Scott Richard and Steve Monahan will send extremely capable people to these panels. I also believe that they will come and voice their opinions in a very informed way. However, if we open it up to the executive directors, you're not just talking about them. You're talking about the executive directors of business associations, the executive directors of all of these different PTAs and so on. You will end up with a committee of executive directors. You could, I should say. And that really is, and we have in the past, and that's, I think, sort of what we're trying to, this is just a different charge, a different calling.
Any other questions, comments? Hearing none, any opposition to the motion? The motion carries. Thank you. Next item.
Your next item is on page 9, item 3.1, consideration of Jumpstart graduation pathways. An additional deck has been distributed. The department recommendation is to approve.
I move.
Thank you, Dr. Beebe. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Guillot, any comments or discussion?
We have a brief presentation, if you wouldn't mind. I also want to highlight my appreciation for Dr. Beebe. I know that I have visited the school, Dr. Beebe, that I believe you are considering converting into a Jumpstart Career Center, and I want to Thank you for that bold step. I know that's a major shift in St. Martin. Let me just talk briefly about this update on Jumpstart, and I'm going to walk through a set of slides on the screen above. I wanted you to be aware of where we are with this project, members, and so if we could move forward with this presentation, I'd like to. You started this 2 years ago with the recognition that the career diploma was being not used, and at the same time we had very few students entering the technical programs of our 2-year colleges and of our workforce training programs. As a result, thousands of graduates are missing out on jobs, and that really was the impetus for starting this project. We began by aligning the jobs, and Dr. Beebe spoke very eloquently about this in an article in The Advocate a couple of days ago, aligning our career programs with our jobs. And so today you're considering maritime pathways as well as what we're calling micro-credential pathways that allow for entrepreneurship and small business development skills. Jumpstart provides a pathway for every student to either universities or to community college and workforce training after high school. And I wanted to share with you today this group of regional teams. And if you look on the screen, you will see in your districts, every single one of your districts represented on that regional team. This is really happening, and you launched this at BESE a couple of years back, and I want to commend all of these teams. These ideas that you're considering today, the maritime team or pathway, the micro-enterprise pathway, these things germinated in these areas. And actually, it is in Greater Acadiana, for example, that the micro-enterprise credential, and Dr. Beebe, you again are represented on that. That's where that pathway originated in Acadiana. So let's just look for a second at where we're headed, and I want to just talk about this for a second. 2015-16, if you can move to that column, if you can look at that column where it says 2015-16 target, I want to share with you where we will be this fall on this chart in terms of Jumpstart implementation, so you have it. Last year we had 5 regional teams. We now, as I said, will be in a point where our pioneer regional teams are fully implementing Jumpstart. And I want you to be secure on that. You voted last year that Jumpstart wouldn't have to be implemented until 2017, but our pioneer teams are implementing it today. And I want you to be clear on that they're ahead of schedule. We believe we're about a year ahead of schedule on Jumpstart. The graduation pathways, we believe, are fully representative of our state's entire workforce spectrum. And we will be setting, I think, a national precedent where we will now be codifying online every one of those pathways in a system that, frankly, any state in the country or country in the world can then look at online and can adopt for themselves as model pathways. You have made grants, as this column indicates, that will sustain these regional teams' activities ongoing. And ultimately, this fall, you will see enrollments in Jumpstart that will be in the 5 figures. And I think that's a critical shift that I want you to be aware of, that we are now turning a corner where this is not a niche program where some kids who maybe aren't going to UL or LSU or what have you are taking. This is going to be a core curriculum in our high schools where kids are going to be pursuing this in significant numbers. That I think is an important articulation. We have 175,000 kids in high school. Jumpstart really kicks in those last 2 years. So you're talking about roughly 80,000 kids. We think of those 80,000, you're going to have a 5-figure enrollment this fall. We have learned some lessons, and I want to just talk about this for a second. Connection with employers is critical, and I know that's obvious, but it's harder to do than probably one might anticipate. It sounds great, but companies don't do this for a living. They do whatever they do for a living. That's one issue that's really, really hard. Also in rural regions, maybe stating the obvious, but this is particularly difficult. Second, the development of curriculum. It's true in the craft trades. The curriculum is there. The certificates are there. In maritime, which is a very specific industry for our state and maybe a couple of others, it's not as much there. So how you create those curriculum and then train teachers is probably the most critical thing of all. Colleges have been total leaders. And candidly, and Mr. Guillot and I were just talking about Louisiana Tech, there are colleges that are taking the lead, and where they're taking the lead, you're seeing thousands of kids enrolled in college coursework. And this is an interesting point. You're going to have as much, if not more, college credits going to the career kids than you are to kids pursuing TOPS. I think that's a very interesting point and one to take note of, and that's thanks to LCTCS and Monty Sullivan. Finally, career counseling is a nut that we have yet to crack. We have some fantastic counselors. The Counselors Association has done as much as any professional association to inform Jumpstart. However, counselors' time and their capacity and workload is greatly taxed. Expecting them to be an expert in issues like maritime, process technology, craft trades, healthcare, and allied sciences, very, very difficult, and we have yet to fully support them in the way they need to. I'm going to move forward because I've covered a lot of this, and I'll move forward to the last slide. What you will be able to see, and this is what I will end with, what you will be able to see soon are the following measures in a report. Growth in career diploma graduates. This year you will see marginal growth. Next year you will see significant growth in the Jumpstart Career Diploma graduates. Second, student industry credential attainment. You'll see bigger numbers, and you'll see a shift in the credentials kids are achieving. Less customer service, less Microsoft Word, more advanced programming credentials, more advanced craft trades and health sciences credentials. Student internships are going to go up, and we'll be able to track that as well, and you'll be able to see a report of student internships, be it in the summer or throughout the course of the year. Our teachers and their credentials, you're going to see more teachers who are themselves credentialed in the trade that they teach, which is a significant increase, and we'll be able to report on that. And finally, districts that are using dedicated career counseling services through their traditional counselors and otherwise, you will be able to see a report on that as well. So I wanted to indicate to you that I want to thank our school systems. I want to thank our colleges and our industry partners, because Jumpstart is moving very, very quickly, and I wanted to make sure we had that today. Today you are considering two new pathways that are evidence of this success. One is the maritime pathway. This is one of the most sophisticated, lucrative, high-growth, high-wage pathways that we're offering. Second is our micro-enterprise. There's been a discussion about how do you incorporate things like cosmetology or real estate, which are not in and of themselves high-growth, high-wage jobs, into a pathway that allows for students to study them, but not accept that they are their limits. And that is what the micro-enterprise credential does. Kudos to all who are involved in developing these pathways, and kudos to the Jumpstart team represented here, Dave Lefkowitz, Ken Bradford, Larry Alexander, for all of their work across the state on this issue. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you.
Ms. Bradford, I'd like to make a statement. I'd just like to congratulate the Jumpstart team as well for their hard work and dedication. And also, I know there were some legislators that was working diligently with them to incorporate the cosmetology and barber initiative within the entrepreneurship. So I thank you, Superintendent White, and the team for allowing those careers to be a part of the entrepreneurship. So thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Hill. Any other questions or comments? Mr. Rammer.
I'll make it brief. I appreciate the update, and I've been really encouraged with progress by the team and across the state and the groups that are working on this. I do sense you hit on all the points that I've seen as being critical, not the least of which is making sure we have qualified teachers for these career paths. I mean, that's critical. I would just know, I'm curious as to, and this is food for thought, you may or may not have a response at this point. I was reading an article yesterday in the Wall Street Journal, I believe it was the Wall Street Journal, just referencing the amount of turnover in every profession, that people have become more mobile. and that the average time on any job has decreased to almost an all-time low. People no longer look into getting into a single profession for 20 years. The average now is 4.3 years, according to this, I'm paraphrasing. I think I would like us to make sure we reach out to these industries that we're creating career paths to some degree, and as they have employees that are exiting who are in good standing but just looking for an alternative profession, that they're fully aware of what we're doing in the education spectrum, because it could be a path that they're interested in. And we probably do that to some extent, but I certainly, as I've traveled the state, I see great things happening and realize the demand, as you mentioned, is increasing. 5 figures of students taking this pathway is a huge number, and it's incumbent upon us to make sure we get them qualified experts in these fields. So I appreciate your work in the work of the state.
I agree, and it's a tough issue because oftentimes it marks a step down in salary, which is an unfortunate statement, but unfortunately it's true. I think the one thing I can say is that we have taken down the requirements for what is called the CTTIE credential from what was approximately 15 courses that you had to take if you were transferring out of industry into our high schools to 1 course. Now, that's not to say it makes a lucrative opportunity, but I think we've cleared the regulatory barriers. Now we've just got to make it happen, and I agree with you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? We have one public speaker, Ms. Moe, Debbie Moe.
Debbie Moe, representing Louisiana Association of Educators. I want to say that I did attend the TOPS advisory meeting, and we did spend some time talking about TOPS Tech and the Jump Start. And one of the things that I brought to them was that more needed to be done to open up the field to women. Now, I understand that any of these jobs could be filled by women candidates. But the ones that when I looked through the list, that most women probably would say I could possibly do something in this area, I counted about 17 to 20. And out of 50, that is an improvement than what was there previously. But I would like to encourage us to do 2 things. Number 1, continue to look for careers or pathways for women that they would readily espouse, and also open up the more male-dominated pathways to women in the sense that we make it, I don't know if you need to do this in a PR fashion or just making sure that the counselors are showing our young women what ways they can actually get involved in some of these other pathways, and that they can be good careers for them. Research does show that what is good for a mother is good for the children. The educational level of a mother more often opens up the career pathways and the educational pathways for her children, whether it be male or female. Thank you all very much.
Ms. Mel, just curious, I appreciate you bringing that to our attention, and you're obviously very close to that, and I know have real passion for it. Could you come back to us with the recommended pathways you think that there's consensus in the community to make those happen?
I can ask my members to give me pathways that they feel are important in their regions for their young women. As far as the community members, I can try to reach out to community members as well.
Yeah,
thank you.
I was going to also make one suggestion. I thought there was an interesting article that I was just discussing with Ms. Bradford in the Washington Post today that identifies that Louisiana ranks last in the country in terms of the ratio of salary paid to professional men and professional women. We have a not even 67% pay for the same roles among women as men, which is the largest gap in the country. The highest is still unfortunate at 87%, but nevertheless we're very low. So you raise this at an opportune time, and one thing I think would be important is to the Jumpstart team, we should report on these measures, diplomas, industry credentials by subgroup. But we should report by race and by gender and other factors, and we will do that. I think it starts with the facts, and that's a very good point by Ms. Miller.
Thank you, Superintendent White, for bringing that out. I meant to bring that out when I was speaking, but I forgot. But you are correct. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Bradford, to
Dr. Beebe.
Ms. Mo's point, there is a plan. In fact, some districts are having the discussions, the conversations with the gender-related roles to where they're exposing the young ladies to the opportunities out there as well as guys, so they're having those conversations. Also, early childhood, child care, I think that's a pathway that we need to consider, because after all, that would align to the early childhood initiative, whereas with these child care providers, we need to, equip the students or arm the students with the skills needed to be successful in that area.
Thank you. Good comments. Any other questions, comments? Hearing none. Any opposition to the motion? Hearing none, the motion carries. Next item.
Your next item is on page 36. Item 4.1, consideration of an update report on the Early Childhood Care and Education Advisory Council. A handout has been distributed. The department recommendation is to receive.
I move.
Thank you, Dr. Beebe. Do I have a second? Ms. Harris, thank you. Any comments or questions? I have one speaker. Ms. Bruffin.
Good morning. I'm Melanie Bronfin with the Policy Institute for Children. At your next BESE meeting, you will be called upon to adopt two major sets of policies. One will establish the entire new accountability system for every early care and education program for children birth through age 4 in our state. The second one will be to establish a coordinated enrollment system, again, for every publicly funded early care and education program birth to age 4 in our state. I've handed out a report that we released with by our organization and Education's Next Horizons that I hope you will read and seriously consider. And I hasten to add, there is an executive summary that's only 3 pages at the beginning before June. This is about just one of the set of policies, the accountability system. But today I'd like to take just a few minutes to outline 3 of the major concerns that we discuss in that report. The first is we are deeply concerned about the inherent conflict of interest being set up by what is being proposed, where a service provider, such as a school district, will be in charge of doing the assessment that will be the basis, the entire basis of their grade.
I hate to interrupt you, but this is not germane to the item that we're voting on.
Well, it was part of the Early Childhood Advisory Council discussion. Well, actually, I tried to discuss it, but we were told we couldn't discuss it because they wanted to bring it up at the next Advisory Council meeting.
I will give you 2 minutes.
Thank you. Given all the challenges we are facing in our K-12 accountability system, why would we create one for early childhood that exposes the very integrity of the system to question in such a fundamental way, where we will have programs doing the assessment on themselves that will be the total basis of the grade that they will receive? The observational assessments should be done by third-party assessors, not the school districts and not the programs that are being assessed. Secondly, the component of the grade will be totally based on this observational assessment, And I don't know of any other state in the country where for early care and education, there's an accountability based on one component, such as this. No component, I mean, we don't even do assessments under age 4 as part of our 4th grade because such assessments are not consistent enough. I'm afraid there's not enough consistency in such an assessment to be the basis of a grade where we can have faith in what that grade is. Third, this is an accountability system. It is not a quality rating and improvement system, which is what we currently have for child care. In other words, what we have set up across the country for early care and education and what we have in our state now is a clear pathway to improvement as well as accountability system for early care and education, at least for child care. What's being proposed now is purely an accountability system. We'll do an assessment, the program will get the results, but how do they improve? Especially child care that has no funding, unlike Head Start or unlike a school district, they get no funding for quality improvement. And in fact, they're currently being funded per child at about half of the other programs. So we'll get a standard, we'll assess them, they'll get a grade, and then what? I encourage you to talk to your child care centers, to your parents in your districts. I would be happy to help facilitate those discussions. To your pre-K coordinators in your schools. I'm deeply concerned about what's being proposed. The coordinated enrollment system is very similar in that you'll have schools enrolling for both their own students as well as their competitors.
Ms. Brad?
Thank you very much.
Mr. Garvey, is it germane to the item that we're fisking to vote on?
I think so.
Okay.
Question for Ms. Bronfman. Have you shared these concerns with the department?
Oh, very much. This report I went over with the early childhood team, and I look forward to working with them from now into June to discuss these items. They saw the report and gave me comments that we included.
I could just provide
Yes,
a little context. I think this is part of the problem with having comment on an item where there is no item. There's been no report issued yet. There's been no proposal made. In fact, my staff is currently touring the state in discussions with educators about these issues. Over the next couple of months, there will be a discussion about this. And so this is an important issue, and Ms. Bronfman raises very important concerns that need to be addressed in a final proposal. I want to give you the assurance that while it's not a subject for this meeting, it will be a subject of the next meeting, and every issue that she's discussing needs a public hearing. It's just not, I think, today.
I get 5 minutes on each of those topics.
Excuse me.
I'm so sorry, John.
You're not prepared for it. I'm not prepared for it, and so I would suggest we have it at the appropriate time.
And in line with what you're saying, when it comes to us, you said at the next meeting, we will be able to change anything that needs to be changed from what's being proposed today?
There is no proposal. So you will receive, as you typically do, you will receive a proposal, and you'll be able to do whatever you choose to do with it.
I know we have no proposal in our packet, but I thought that the department had been issuing some kind of information to the public about what would be coming to us.
No.
Okay.
We're just
so it's still in flow, still in flux, and we can still adjust.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
What we're voting on today is to receive the report from the Early Childhood Care and Advisory Council. That's what this motion is. Any other comments? Hearing none, any opposition to the motion? We receive the report.
Thank you so much.
Next item. I do encourage everyone to take this and read it and to give input. It is an important issue.
Your next item is on page 42, item 5.1, consideration of revisions to Bulletin 741, Louisiana Handbook for School Administrators related to the creation of a diploma option for students assessed on the Louisiana Alternate Assessment Level 1. A new copy of the Bulletin 741 revisions for this item has been distributed. The department recommendation is to approve as notice of intent as amended, noting that sections 2318 and 2319 will be approved as a declaration of emergency effective April 15, 2015.
I need a motion, a response for the motion. Ms. Smith, do you need a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Mr. Romer.
I would like a little back, just a little.
Yeah. Superintendent.
Sure.
Thank you. Members, this is a particularly complicated issue, so I'm going to give you maybe just 2 minutes of background. A diploma, as you know, is awarded for kids having done certain things, and you, for the most part, have the power to determine what those things are as a board. There are some criteria in the law, however, and the law right now distinguishes between 2 types of diplomas. One is the TOPS University pathway. One is the Jumpstart Career Diploma. This is effectively a way for certain students to achieve the career diploma path. Now, as you know, the legislature took it upon itself last year to change, and we have supported, for some students under Act 833, how they achieve the career diploma. Those are kids who are pursuing the regular standards, the regular curriculum, but are demonstrating through an alternate means that they've passed it. The problem right now is that leaves out, what about kids who aren't pursuing the regular standards? These are kids who we have come to know as La 1 kids, roughly 1% of our state's kids. They tend to be functioning with a significant cognitive disability. These students are not covered under Act 833 because they actually are not using the traditional standards. They're using alternate standards. Thus, what this diploma path does today is to identify a way that schools can allow students who are classified under the Law 1 categorization to demonstrate proficiency and capability of graduating. Now, let me say why that's important. Beyond just the idea that students should be able to demonstrate their proficiency, many kids who are Law 1, not all, but many, will be self-sufficient or at least partially self-sufficient, and they will themselves be eligible, productive members of our workforce. They, too, are going to compete for opportunities with their fellow citizens. Having a diploma is an important part of providing economic opportunity, provided that they as individuals have done everything they can and have met criteria that are necessary in order to meet with diploma requirements. I should tell you that the idea of this diploma then registering for accountability points is a separate question. That question runs up against federal law, and we are actively petitioning the federal government to be the first state that has developed a novel proposal whereby students meeting the 1% designation can achieve a diploma through a meaningful, challenging process that can then ultimately qualify a school to receive accountability points. I want to reemphasize, we're talking about a narrow band of kids. This is within the 1% category, a percentage of that. So you're talking about a fraction of a very small fraction. Nevertheless, what this does is to lay out certain performance indicators for such students based on the courses that they've taken, based on the assessments that they have taken to pass, that ultimately would allow them to qualify for a diploma. I'm happy to respond to specific details. I want to thank Bridget Devlin, who has worked with special educators and others across our state. I know we were receiving comment from some of those special educators. I think they can probably fill in some of the context gaps. So I may suggest that we hear from them in advance of there being a back and forth dialogue at this level. But we certainly look forward to the questions. Thank you.
Board members, if it's okay with you, we will take public comments and come back to the board if we don't get your questions answered, if that's okay. Susan Vaughn.
Thank you. Susan Vaughn. I'm Director of Special Education in Ascension Parish, and I'm also representing the Louisiana Association of Special Ed Administrators. We are very much in support of this change in Bulletin 741, but we do have a few concerns. The main concern is when it comes into effect. We're very much worried about the students who are already in Law 1 in the high school setting, that if this goes into effect right now, we may have some students who are in their third or fourth year that will not be eligible for a diploma because we won't be able to get the career courses done. Most of the schools have modified credit courses that they're already getting for the math and the English and the science and the social studies, but we don't have a lot of the career courses out there. So we wanted to see if there would be a date where this would go into effect for incoming freshmen, or for where it would be phased in if we couldn't get that for the seniors this year. This year's seniors will, Law 1 will graduate because they won't be under this. But if a lot of these students stay through the age of 22, so they may have already been there 4 years, and we may not be able to get those courses in for them.
Thank you, Ms.
That was my
Vaughn.
concern. But I do thank the department very much for moving forward on this, so that eventually, hopefully, we will be able to get accountability points for the schools, for the students, and the teachers who work very hard for this population.
Thank you, Ms. Vaughn.
In answer to Susan's question, as with many changes, Act 833 had an immediate effective date. This has an immediate effective date. We then need to, at the guidance level, guide districts, as we've tried to do with Act 833, on how to treat various groups of kids. It becomes extremely, as you know, detailed, because some students may have done the things necessary to do this, and we just need to give them the diploma. Some students may have never been given any indication that this was a possibility, and thus have none of the credentials required to achieve that diploma. We will give guidance that will try to group out those specific groups of kids to districts and say, this is how you should handle these specific groups of kids.
I guess part of that, I'm just very concerned about our high school counselors, because they have 15 versions of how students exit right now, and this is just going to be one more group to add to their list in their catalogs.
Thank you, Ms. Vaughn. Debbie Moe.
Debbie Moe, representing the Louisiana Association of Educators. I want to thank both the legislature and the department for working very diligently on this pathway for our children with disabilities. I have family members who will actually benefit from this. The one thing that I do want to bring forward is the fact that with special ed and the inclusion model that is being used, a great deal of responsibility is going to fall on the teacher of record for each of the classes that these children will be taking, and therefore they need to know exactly what their responsibilities are. This year, I think, with the bill being ratified or accepted and signed into law last summer, was a very quick turnaround. I am concerned about the kids in this category for this year. But next year, we need to make sure that every single teacher of record who teaches a child with an IEP understands exactly what his or her role is, because it's going to require some extra work on the teacher of record, the regular education teacher's plate. And I don't think any teacher is adverse to doing the extra work for these children. We never are. But we need to know exactly what we are responsible for. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Moe. Dr. Sheila Lockett.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Let me first start by saying thank you for allowing me to stand or sit here today before you. I am Dr. Sheila Lockett, Director for Department of Exceptional Children in Caddo Parish Public Schools. I come to you saying that we support the collaboration techniques moved by LDOE in working with districts to implement this process. It will provide a way for our students to be successful. Our students are not placed in a box, but they should be given an opportunity to express their skills, their abilities, as they become positive, productive, and independent citizens in society. I and my team from Caddo Parish have driven many days. Every month they offered a meeting to discuss, to talk, and to hear the collaboration techniques and what we're doing. And we appreciate what the State Department of Education has listened to our concerns, advised us, and provided guidance, actually, on the implementation of this process. We're moving forward with this process along with Act 833, and we're looking forward to helping our students receive what they need to become independent citizens in society. I appreciate your support as BESE board members in making sure and realizing that students with disabilities should be afforded an opportunity to a great education as every other student. We work very hard to make sure that we do that, and we thank you for what you do for our students.
Thank you. Brandy Golston-Neal. Brandy Golston-Neal. Sean Fleming. Oh, wait.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the board. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I would like to also just thank the department and Superintendent White, specifically Bridget Devlin and Jamie Wong for making the adjustments that are before you today, and just putting a pathway for kids on Law 1 to be able to graduate. Somebody did bring it to my attention. Another thing in this change is extending the 5% rule for kids' final grade for kids who are eligible under Act 833. And y'all, that has been a rule for kids under Law 2. And somebody just mentioned whether y'all going to make that an emergency rule to go into effect immediately, because kids are taking tests now and it'll go into effect. I don't know if that's the will, but I would think parents would be very appreciative if y'all considered that. It's just something that came to my attention. I know, President Rome, you can do that after the meeting if you so chose. So thank you all very much. I want to appreciate Superintendent White's also going to meet with this directors of special ed, I understand, on Friday and clarify some other things, because some people are still grappling with the changes, and I just appreciate him taking the effort to meet with stakeholders and clarify everything. Thank you all.
Thank you, Mr. Fleming. Ms. Guston. Oh, I'm sorry, Superintendent.
I might just add, because it was a point of discussion, some of you will recall that Representative Schroeder was here and Mr. Fleming spoke as well. I thought we had a productive meeting and after that, which led to some of the things that Mr. Fleming was discussing. So thank you.
Thank you.
I just wanted to congratulate the stakeholders and reiterate Bridget's efforts. I know I'm a novice on the board, but I think this is the first time I've seen consensus on a special ed item since I've been on the board, so congratulations.
Yeah.
Ms. Bradford?
Mr.
Before we
Garvey?
go on, a question that was raised by Mr. Fleming was whether we or not we were going to do an emergency rulemaking on on part of this, and I was wondering if we were, if that's the plan of the department.
Superintendent?
Yes, although he's talking about a separate issue. He's talking about the percentage of a course grade that is accounted for by an end-of-course test for students under Act 833. Traditionally, it's been 30%. At the Special Ed Advisory Panel, it was discussed that it would go to 5%, and we do plan on doing an emergency item.
On the 5% issue?
Correct. Yes.
Great, thank you.
Ms. Guston-Neal.
Good morning. I am Brandy Golston-Neal from the Department of Exceptional Children, Caddo Parish Public Schools as well. I, too, am in support of the efforts that you guys are putting forth. It is because of the guidance that you all have provided that we've been able to support our district. We've been able to meet with counselors and parents and principals and teachers and even with students to make sure that they're getting everything that they need. And again, I just want to reiterate what Dr. Lockett has already said. We are very appreciative and support your efforts.
Thank you so much. Regina Washington. And Ms. Fauché, if you'll just come on down, you'll be next. If you'll pull the mic just a little closer to you. Must be on.
Oh, it wasn't on. Regina Washington, Supervisor of People Appraisal with Caddo Parish Schools, and I too support this act. I appreciate the fact that students with disabilities now are afforded to be individuals and not placed in a position to where they're expected to achieve and advance at the same rate as other students when they've not been identified as such. I appreciate the efforts of the State Department of Education and its staff members and this board for considering this act and for implementing it in a timely fashion. Thank you.
Thank you. Superintendent.
And I, too, as the representing the Superintendents Association, would like to applaud all stakeholders involved. This has been an issue that in which we've all been able to come together. Bridget Devlin and Jamie Wong have done an outstanding job. Superintendent White has called us in at every step of the way. We've been on the committees, and we've had significant input. So we are in support of this proposal, but I do have to take it one step further. As John smiles at me. The accountability piece to this, as we present this to the federal government, we know that students who maximize their potential and receive the diploma through this pathway will still count as a zero in the cohort graduation rate. And we accept that to an extent because we've been told that this is the federal regulation and the way of determining cohort graduation rates nationally. But we have a component in our accountability system, the graduation index. And as we put a proposal together to present to US DOE, I would like this body to go on record with the Accountability Commission of valuing this diploma in the same way that we value the TOPS University and the career diploma, that this would be worth 100 points for these students. Not all Y1 students will receive this. There has to be employability skills and transition services. They will be maximizing their potential. This is the highest status that they will be able to attain. And I think that we should celebrate this for the students, their families, the educators involved, and the community. So when we make this proposal of how it fits in, and we value this, if these students complete this within their cohort time, that we would value this diploma in our graduation index the same as we would value the diploma for any other student within our school system. So I'd ask you to consider that seriously and to help us fight for that recognition for these students.
This actually provides a good opportunity for me to elucidate the federal government's role in accountability and where all that is. This is a particularly interesting time for those of us, you and me, who make state-level education policy because, as you know, the federal government is considering, in fact, this afternoon the Senate will take up in committee a rewrite of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, which is called No Child Left Behind. And I have urged, and I have a letter to the ranking member and the committee chair in the Senate side today that will urge them that to get a bill done. It is important that a bill get done, in my view, for two reasons. One, accurate or not, the impression created among our population in our state that education policy is being dictated from Washington is not a helpful one to the ongoing teaching and learning in our state. It needs to be clarified by the federal government and by the Congress that issues like the one that Superintendent Boche just raised are the domain of states and not the domain of the federal government. And I'm urging the Senate, Senator Alexander, as well as Senator Murray, to give us that clarity as quickly as we can. Secondly, it's important because the kinds of things that we're talking about the Law 1 issue here, this is the innovation that comes from states. Now, the states, our policymaking framework is designed so that states can come up with stuff like Doris and Bridget and Sean came together to create with Jamie and others. And the feds are on a call with me saying, no, you can't do that because that's not exactly how this kid is like every other kid. Well, I got news. This kid's needs aren't like every other kid's. But somebody who's thousands of miles away, could never be in a position to innovate at that level like we are here at the state level. And that's why I think this is an important thing. The tension is going to be this. In June, and this is what I think Doris is urging us, we're going to be submitting a proposal for a waiver from No Child Left Behind for federal approval. This proposal will be included in that. However, at the same time, the Congress is going to be debating a bill that will not anymore require us to go to them for approval of stuff like this. So I will keep you abreast of this as this process goes forward. But I'm hoping that we are not sitting here, at least later in this calendar year, debating whether or not the feds should be involved at this level of our accountability system. They should not. I think there's general agreement on both sides of the aisle on that. But that's what's creating the dynamic that the superintendent is referring to. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Superintendent.
Madam Chairman.
Ms. Smith.
Thank you, and I appreciate that explanation. Is there a possibility then that could be something that the Accountability Commission could address, or as far as, and then bring, I guess, to the board, and then we have to see what happens during the summer with regard to the federal legislation?
I think we will raise it at the Accountability Commission. It will certainly come up, yes. I would say that we, in the current policy framework, unless the law is passed in Washington, we need to understand from the feds, would they ever approve it anyways?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Then we would raise at the Accountability Commission, well, what kind of points would it receive? How would you treat it in the graduation index? These questions that Doris is raising. But I just want to tell you that there's a tricky sequencing of the feds making this law with us coming to the feds for approval of things that they wouldn't have to approve under the law if it were changed.
And would you just please remind me, because I'm trying to, have we actually been penalizing ourselves as a state with regard to students that actually are completing what these students in Law 1 have completed? If what are they receiving now? Is it a certificate?
Certificate.
Okay, so it's still, I knew it was when I was superintendent, I just didn't know if we had done anything else. So we're basically penalizing ourselves even when students are achieving as much as they possibly could with regards to their abilities.
Yeah, I wouldn't say we're penalizing ourselves in the grad rate as it regards these kids. I think it's fair to say that most, if not all, states are not counting these particular students in the grad rate. Now, as Mr. Fleming has pointed out, there may well be inconsistencies in how students with disabilities are counted from one state to the next, in the grad rate. Otherwise, I'm not talking so much about Law 1 kids, but about other kids. What's important, it seems to me, is that you've got a perfectly well-intended set of people in Washington who are creating a set of negative consequences by trying to engineer the accountability decisions for local states. And as a result, what you've got is this. And Doris said this, our accountability system does not recognize Law 1 students. As a result, there is no accountability incentive. There is, of course, a humanitarian incentive, but there is not an accountability incentive to service those kids. So in an attempt to protect students with disabilities, the feds have actually forced states to create a policy that ignores students with disabilities. And that is why the law needs to be changed, among other reasons.
Thank you.
We have a motion.
Keep it going. Let's go.
No.
Sorry. I'll take it where I can get it.
We have a motion before us with a proper second. Any objection to the motion? The motion carries. Next item.
Your next item is on page 45, item 5.2, consideration of revisions to the Bulletin 139, Louisiana Child Care and Development Fund programs, as required by Act 868 of the 2014 regular legislative session. The department recommendation is to approve as notice of intent.
Do I have a motion? Thank you, Mr. Gill, and I need a second. Thank you, Ms. Harris. Any questions or discussions, comments?
Yes, can Superintendent White go over some details? Because I think this is something that Ms. Melanie, I can't remember her last name, but I think Bronin was trying to allude to. So can you please give us a brief overview of the changes? Because I'm going to have some questions.
I'd be happy to. It's going to be somewhat lengthy, but as you know, the law calls for the transition of the Child Care Development Fund from the Division of Child and Family Services into under BESE's governance. Provider certification is the function that obviously certifies child care, Head Start, and family day home providers, in this case child care and family day home providers, to make them eligible to receive child care payments from now this agency. The reason to amend this bulletin, which is Bulletin 139, which is created as the CCAP, or the Child Care Bulletin, continues the process of transitioning this particular function into the department. In other words, this is an ongoing transition of responsibilities under this department. So this is a function of essentially bringing over and into this bulletin the new function of licensing and maintaining a registry of such providers. Specifically, this change does the following. One, It authorizes provider certification, meaning our ability to certify these providers as of July 1, which is in the law. That's just a reflection of the statutes. Secondly, it makes minor administrative changes to DCFS's process versus our process. It ensures that we require with the health and safety requirements of the law that are currently on the books. And it establishes a notice of violation and a corrective action policy, meaning that, Ms. Hill, for example, you could have a circumstance where if a licensed center is out of compliance with the law, this establishes a process for corrective action that the department can enact over that body. This is not a change. This is reflective of a change in the law. It's also not a significant change from how this was conducted at DCFS. It's just bringing this under this administrative body as opposed to that administrative body.
Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, any opposition to the motion? Motion carries. Next item.
Your next item is on page 53, item 5.3, consideration of revisions to Bulletin 741, non-public, Louisiana Handbook for Non-Public School Administrators, to make technical edits. The department recommendation is to approve as notice of intent.
Do I have a motion? Thank you, Mr. Romer. Do I have a second? Thank you, Mr. Guyot. Any comments or questions? Hearing none, any opposition to the motion? Motion carries. Next item.
Your next item is on page 57, item 5.4, consideration of policy revisions to Bulletin 111, the Louisiana School District and State Accountability System, related to the calculation of progress points for schools with high school grades. The department recommendation is to approve as notice of intent, as well as a declaration of emergency effective April 15, 2015.
I need a motion. Mr. Guyot, Mr. Romer seconds. Any comments or
Members,
questions?
I'll make a comment. You'll recall that this board, for those of you who are on the board in 2012, we made an adjustment to the way that the school performance scores were calculated to include for the first time a calculation of progress. And roughly 7 to 8% of a school's letter grade now is calculated by virtue of the progress that kids make, not just by virtue of how high are its kids scoring. We did that as a kind of trial outside of the formula called progress points. And we did it in high schools as well as we did it in elementary schools. And we've seen a lot of gains with low-achieving kids. It seems to have worked. However, the policy and the way that it was designed using tests has taken greater impact and shape at the elementary and middle school level than at the greater than at the high school level. And as a result, we only had 4 schools that had a 9 to 12 grade span this year get the bonus points or the progress points out of roughly 150. Why was that? It turns out that our goal, which is to have a significant number of kids who are achieving low in 8th grade, get high scores, high predicted scores in the 10th and 11th grade years, taking the Explore test, the Plan test, and the ACT test. It was too high a projection. And basically, we were saying that kids should get at the top range of what would be expected. Turns out that doesn't happen very often, and understandably. Now, we still want to keep a high bar, but we want to make high schools feel like this is an achievable thing. And we have proposed, therefore, a policy that would adjust slightly downward the bar that kids would have to reach in order for schools to qualify for progress points. That would move from roughly 2% of high schools to roughly 33% of high schools earning the progress points. And I hope it will be more, because it has a limitless ceiling, provided however many high schools improve their performance of these kids. Now, you will, obviously, the accountability system is a creation of your doing and our doing. So you could argue that it should be 25%. You could argue that it should be 50%. You could argue it should be 100%. There are different arguments on each side of this. We think that by lowering the threshold slightly So that what you're saying is a group of low-achieving kids now generate points for their schools if they get above the median of what's expected, that creates a logical framework within which schools can earn more points, and it will keep high schools focused on these kids, which is what we need. And we think more high schools will pursue it, more high schools will get it. Look forward to the debate, and thank you for your consideration.
Oops. Any other comments? Ms. Harris?
I just have a question, because I'm elementary and not
Yeah.
high school. So if a student has an expected score range of 14 to 15, what would their score have to be to receive the progress points? And I'm not even sure I'm asking that correctly.
15.
Okay.
15.
Thank you.
Mr. Reimer?
I want to make sure I understand as well. So a subgroup of students who've been identified, if within that subgroup a certain number reach or exceed the median expected growth of that subgroup, then this would apply. Is that correct?
Correct. And I think it is just to put a cap on that. Prior to, our expectation was that a certain number got at the top of their expected range. We're saying a certain number now should get above the median of that expected range, and that's the switch.
Okay.
Any other comments or questions? Hearing none, any opposition to the motion? Motion carries. Next item.
That concludes our agenda.
We are adjourned. The next meeting will start in 10 minutes.